Hey guys, it's Tomatoda, and today I'm going to show you how I make this cute resin hair barrette. For this project, I need a cute silicone hair barrette mold. I bought this one from Kawaii Kitten 241 on Instagram. Definitely go check her out, she makes amazing molds. Keep in mind that she does offer two sizes for the barrette molds. The ones I bought were the 2.2 by 0.8 inches, and she does sell the barrette clips on her website as well, but I had already bought my own on Aliexpress. I got the 5.5 centimeters one. Now to begin, I'm going to paint in the details of the mold using acrylic paint. I like to start with the smaller inner details first using a toothpick. Make sure to get into all the crevices, but keep it thick. The acrylic paint that I'm using is Artist Loft from Michaels. I use this just because it's a cheap set, but I'm pretty sure any acrylic paint would work as well. I try not to paint next to wet paint just in case the colors get mixed, so I like to work on separate sections in order to give the wet paint a chance to dry. However, one thing you should be careful about the dried painted areas is that you don't accidentally remove it or peel it off. Because the foundation is silicone, acrylic paint peels off pretty easily since there's no grip. However, this can also be beneficial. Like if you mess up, you can just wait for it to dry and then peel it off cleanly and try again. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and remove all the pupils because there's no way that they're going to stick. Normally, I wouldn't have colored them because it's not inside of a crevice like the nose is. The pupil on this mold are like raised, so it makes the paint more susceptible to being removed, which is also why I didn't color the outline, but I just wanted to demonstrate to you guys like what could happen. Once the small details are fully dried, I'm going to paint the larger details with a ball tool. Glopping it all in, covering the full background, but using a light hand so that I don't accidentally remove the small colored details. And after it's filled, I'm going to leave it to dry, which might take a few hours depending on the environment, I guess. Now it's time to pour in the resin, and here I'm going to introduce you guys to today's video sponsor, Let's Resin. So to be honest, I have never used any of the products before, which is why before I committed to this long-term sponsorship, I wanted to test it out for myself. I'm almost finished with my first bottle now, and here's a few of the things I've made with it. Let me give you guys a mini review of the 7 things that I've observed using this. Number 1. I don't know if this is a pro or a con, but the solution is very watery. Or compared to what I'm used to, it's very watery, which honestly, it surprised me quite a bit, so I wanted to mention that first. The brands I've used in the past were more of a syrup type of consistency, but this pours right out like a water faucet. Number 2, because of the watery texture, I do have a hard time mixing slowly. And if you know, the slower you mix, the less microbubbles you get, and the faster you mix, you get a shit ton of microbubbles. And because there's no friction, I tend to mix pretty fast with this, just subconsciously. And so I do end up with quite more microbubbles than I would normally get with other brands. However, I have noticed that the microbubbles rise up quicker. They float to the top really quick, and then I pop that shit with my lighter and all is good. So although I initially do get a lot of bubbles while mixing, the after results are good because all that shit pops off. Does that make sense? Number 3, it doesn't smell obnoxiously bad. Honestly, I do have a bad sense of smell, so personally, I only smelled like a slight sweet scent when I was using the resin, but for those of you who are sensitive to smells, you'll probably smell something more, I would assume. My husband has a good sense of smell, and whenever I use resin in my craft room, he would comment that it smells like cancer. But ever since I switched to less resin, he hasn't said a word. Which, by the way, does not mean that this resin isn't toxic. All resin has its dangers. So when you're dealing with epoxy resin of any brand, please wear protective gear. The nasty fumes still exist even if you can't smell it. Number 4. It cures rock hard. Number 5. This had me pretty excited. The yellowing is very minimal. So I left this dish indoors and I left this one here on my windowsill for 2 months. And here's a comparison of the two. Like, look at that. Where is the yellowing? Also, I am sorry that the dittos are of different colors, but I ran out of lilac clay at the time, so I had to substitute it with a shiny ditto. Number 6. I was very worried about the doming because of the runny consistency, but it domes perfectly well. You'll also see it when I demonstrate it later in the video. Number 7. Now, the one thing that I learned thanks to Let's Resin is that there is an expiration date. It expires after 6 months of opening, which I never knew resin could expire. But when I googled it, it's a real thing. Epoxy resin expires. So now, I mean, this isn't like Let's Resin's fault, like just resin in general. I feel like it's kind of a ticking time bomb. Like when you buy too many bananas and you feel pressure to finish eating them before they go bad. And I know like the epoxy resin pack that I got was the smallest one, and I can definitely finish these bottles in 6 months, but slapping a time on it just kind of like makes me anxious. I don't know. I just didn't like knowing this truth, but it's a truth that needs to be known. Anyways, if you guys are interested in trying out Let's Resin, there will be an affiliate link in the description box below. You can get 10% off, and I also get a bit of commission on that. Cha-ching! Now back to the project. I'm going to mix my epoxy resin for the hair barrette. It's a 1-to-1 part ratio mix, and I'm gonna try and mix it slowly to prevent too many micro bubbles. Once it's fully mixed, I'm gonna add in my pigments and some white alcohol ink because I want it to be opaque. However, I'm kind of not happy with this purple color. I wanted a lighter lavender, but it's too late to turn back now, and I didn't feel like mixing a new batch of resin. With gloves on, I'm going to use my fingers to lightly spread a smallish amount of resin into the crevices of the mold to prevent air bubbles from being trapped. You can also use a paintbrush, but cleaning resin off of a paintbrush is just like something I'm not willing to deal with right now, so I used a gloved finger. Now I'm going to wait a minute to let the resin settle and for the micro bubbles to rise. Once I think it's good enough, I'm going to pour some more resin halfway into the mold. It's already thin to begin with, so don't go too crazy. After waiting for 5 minutes, I'm going to use a lighter to pop all the micro bubbles and then wait for it to cure overnight. Here's what it looks like the next day. Pretty cute already, isn't it? Now I have to paint the outline, but because the details on the top surface is all paint, I can't do my regular technique of filling in the creases with dark paint and then removing with acetone. That would actually remove the detailed paint job, or it would heavily smudge the colors into each other. So what I need to do is add an extra clear coat of resin to protect the paint. It's gonna get a bit messy here, so make sure to put on your gloves. Just like I did before, I'm going to use my finger to spread the resin into the details and then pour in more resin until it's filled to the middle. Now I have to figure out which piece came out of which cavity, because if you get it wrong, you will end up with a failure like this. Once I've determined that, I'm going to finger more resin into the crevices of the barrette. Then I'm going to reinsert it into the mold, carefully pressing down from one end to the other in order to prevent air being trapped below. Do it slowly because the resin underneath is going to overflow around the edges, but redirect that overflow onto the back of the piece. You can add more or remove excess resin, whatever you feel is necessary, and keep pushing the piece into the mold to squeeze out all the air bubbles. Wait 5 minutes, pop all the micro bubbles, and let this shit cure overnight. Here are the results the next day. Now it's time to color in the outline. I'm using dark brown acrylic paint, and I'm just smearing it in with a paintbrush and then wiping off the excess on a dry paper towel. Make sure that there's no empty crevices. I know the excess isn't fully off when I'm wiping it here, but that's okay. Just set it to dry once the outline is done, and when it is fully dry, I'm going to put some acetone on the paper towel, and I'm going to wipe off the rest of the excess brown paint, making sure it looks clean. Then, on a whim, I thought gold outlines might be kind of cool. I was pretty curious what it would look like, so I took the same brown paint, but I mixed it with Pearl-X powder in Aztec Gold. And then I used my fingers to smother the paint inside the outlines because I couldn't find my paintbrush. Okay, I didn't try very hard to find a paintbrush, but I was in the moment, so I just used my fingers. And as I'm saying this, you know what? I feel like a rainbow gradient outline would be pretty cool too. I'll try that next time. Anyways, here's what the two outlines look like, and now it's time to dome them. Once again, mixing my epoxy resin, I'm slowly applying it over the top of the hair clip. When I first worked with this resin, I was afraid that the watery texture would mean it wouldn't dome very well and cause a lot of spillage, but as you can see, it performs normally. It domes the way I want it to. After popping all the bubbles, I let the resin cure overnight. Now, the resin part is all finished, and here's what it looks like with a black outline, by the way. It is time to attach the resin piece to the hair clip. I'm using this Gorilla Glue here. It's pretty much like E6000, and I'm gonna apply it onto the metal base and spread it around with a toothpick. This glue actually smells way worse than the resin did, by the way. You can probably also use something similar to Crazy Glue as well, but please do not use UV resin to attach this. UV resin is not glue, and it does a pretty shitty job at adhering to non-porous surfaces, which is metal and this resin here. So if you do use it, it's gonna eventually pop off. After the glue fully dries, here's what the completed barrette looks like. I know this project takes a few days to complete, but I just love how I can get different colored subjects and a different color outline. Like, I don't know, it just makes me happy. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!